Thank you, Mark, and thanks also to the organizers, the hosts, the CatDem Foundation, SILC, and ELF for inviting us here. I think this is a very valuable initiative that should be repeated by many organizations throughout Europe. Like the others, in fact, speaking as the third one in a row, you're always in a position where you risk repeating what other people have said, especially if they said the things that you also believe in. Please, my apologies if I repeat what's already been said. But I'll start with something that hasn't been said, which is to explain what International IDEA is in a nutshell. Because International IDEA is different from the other organizations that are here behind the table. We're an intergovernmental organization, which means that the owners of the Institute are 27 member states. Member states from 6 different continents, so actually we fall also both in the scope of this meeting of European organizations and outside or beyond that. We have countries among our member states such as Ghana, Nepal, Mongolia, many Latin American countries. And in fact, Spain is also a member country. It holds the chairmanship this year, and actually the member states are meeting as we speak in Madrid in their annual meeting to look at the strategy forward for the institution, and especially focusing on the Arab world. What does International IDEA do? We have been working for about 15 years, or it's about 17 actually by now, on issues that concern democracy in the broader sense. So it's been elections, what it started with, but political parties has been added to that quite soon after. Constitution building, especially now in the Arab world. And many other things such as gender, security, marginalized groups are things that we focus on. We have regional offices in all the continents we work in. We have a regional office in Latin America, which is based in Costa Rica, one for Africa in Pretoria. We have a regional office in Asia, which is currently in Australia, but will move to Indonesia, and so on, plus many national-based country offices, especially again in the Arab world, where we're establishing not just an office in Egypt for the region, but now also in Tunisia, and we're looking beyond to also be involved in Libya, for instance. The headquarters then finally is based in Stockholm, which is where I work from, and I work in the political parties team of International IDEA, about which I'll tell you a little bit more later on. Then about myself, the interesting thing for me about this meeting is that I'm hearing things from different organizations that I have also been involved in. I currently work in an intergovernmental organization working with political parties, but in my previous job I worked in an organization such as the IPD, a multi-party institution, and before that I worked for a political party organization that also did party-to-party support. So it's interesting to me to see the differences and commonalities between the institutions. That is something that I'd like to talk more about later on, to try and see how the different organizations are different, but how they also can help each other to do a better job. And that will touch on many of the things that were just mentioned about looking for added values and complementarity. Now, I have worked in 3 different organizations, but let me assure you that doesn't mean that I know how it's done. Not just because my intelligence is not up to the standards to be able to tell you, but really because it's a field that we know very little about. We know how many parties have been trained, how many politicians have been trained in the past couple of years, actually since the 1990s, or maybe just before that, when this whole field of work started. And on the other hand, we know which parties have won elections, which parties have lost elections, which politicians have become ministers and which have disappeared. And I think your example was very good of the politicians that were trained. And then decades down the line, you see him in a position and you wonder, how does that relate to the kind of support I gave in the past? So the relationship between what we put in years ago and what came out in the end, is very unclear. In some cases, we claim that we've been very successful, but it could also have been other factors that have influenced that. And it's something that all democracy organizations, especially those working on political parties, are struggling with, to define what it is that they can do and how it impacts on the way political parties work. And in fact, it's led to a network of political party assistance organizations that comes together every so many months to discuss these issues. And many of the organizations here around the table are also part of that, that platform. And I think every new player in this field should also consider being part of that discussion. Because if we invest money in political parties, we need to know what the effect is. Especially because, as Paul said, it's a dangerous field. It's a field of power relations, and if you invest in the wrong organization or in the wrong way, the outcomes might be wrong, might be sometimes harmful for the political climate that you're trying to improve. So that's one message that I'd like to give here today, that I think that cooperation is extremely important, and that anyone that is interested in furthering the debate and finding out how best to do it is invited to join that network. How to do it is intimately linked to who does it. The three types of organizations that I just described, the intergovernmental organizations, the multi-party organizations, and the party-to-party organizations, are very different in the way they operate, in their goals, and therefore also have very different outcomes of the support they give. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the differences later, but let me first tell you a little bit about what IDEA does in the area of political parties. International IDEA was founded with a mandate to mainly focus on providing comparative experiences. So taking a democracy or democratization experience from one country and showing it to another environment where the actors can borrow from some of the elements that might be useful to their context. And to make it more concrete, what we, for instance, do in my team is currently we're building a database with regulations from all countries in the world for party finance. So as was already discussed, the financing of political parties is something that is crucial for the way political parties operate, both the state funding and private funding, the way that's regulated. And what we're trying to do is to get all those regulations from across the world into one database, so that when a political party in a country tries to embark on new regulation, it has the information to compare what is useful, what is less useful. And we have the networks to fly in the right people to share their experiences with the ones that are trying to do it for the first time. That's one example. Another example that we're currently looking at is what we call programmatic parties, which is really helping or trying to discover how political parties can focus more on policies than just on personalities. Even though both will always remain important for political parties, too many parties, and I think Paul explained it very well, especially for Africa, but not limited to that continent. Too many political parties focus only on personalities and do not have the power to focus on policies that will actually provide benefits to their electorate in socioeconomic terms. Now, in some countries, political parties have made that shift. Brazil has done that in the past 10 years. India has done that to a certain extent. Korea has done that, whereas other countries have not. So what IDEA is trying to do is to find the comparative experiences and see which elements in a society lead up to a greater focus on policies. And this is also where I think cooperation might be of importance. Because as we're doing the research that allows actors to see where their interventions could be more or less fruitful, say in country X, you see elements that are similar to the ones in Brazil 10 years ago, then we can share those experiences with organizations that are better experienced in then helping political parties directly to develop those policies. And that's where I think the different organizations meet each other, where they have their own experiences that also have their limits. And that's something that I'd like to share with you as well, because although we all work in the same field, I think there's a couple of elements where we're very different. And first of all, I think neutrality is a key issue. The party-to-party organizations are, by definition, not neutral, because they have an ideology that they believe in, and they search for partners that share that ideology. The multi-party institutions, of course, don't necessarily have one ideology that they stand behind. So they come with a less partisan view towards the partners they want to work with. And then the intergovernmental organizations such as International IDEA, but it's the same for UNDP, don't even have a country that is linked to what they do. Not one specific country, like for instance the Danish Institute has. But then again, intergovernmental organizations do work from the perspective of governments, which in some countries, if you want to work with the opposition, might turn out to be difficult. So in some cases, the neutrality of the one will allow the organization to work with the actors that really make a difference. And in other countries, it's the other organization that has that potential. And again, that's where I think we need to look at cooperation, so that we're sure that given the specific context of each country, the organization that is best placed to provide the support can do that. And neutrality is one thing, and seeing how that allows you to cooperate with your partners. Another one is your expertise, of course. Like I said, International IDEA comes from a background of providing comparative experiences. So it's a lot of research capacity that we have that allows us to provide all kinds of information to parties, but not necessarily to train those parties. And I think the experiences that have been shared before me of working directly with parties is something that my organization would find much more difficult to do. Paul said party building, campaigning, policy development, helping MPs in sort of twinning exercises. These are things that party-to-party organizations are much better placed to do, for the mere fact that they can allow themselves to be outspoken about things like policies, to use their political networks that are much stronger. You only have to look in your own party towards your own constituency and see where the political expertise is. So that's a definite strength of party-to-party support. So, for instance, in the area of programmatic parties, where we're trying to get political parties to focus more on policies, that work that IDEA is doing in terms of research and comparative experience directly meets the work of party-to-party organizations. Excuse me. And then funding, maybe finally, this is a delicate topic, but in my experience a very important one. I have worked for a political party in the Netherlands that had very little funds, and as a result of that was not able to be as effective as a bigger organization would normally do. So instead of working in 10 different countries and just supporting political parties through one training a year, the option that party-to-party organizations have is to focus on just a few countries and really get involved, so that they really know what it is that's happening in that party, so that they also know that what they're doing has effect, and that the training that they have given results in that politician becoming active in elections, in parliament. It allows you to monitor better what's happening to your money and to your interventions. So that funding, I think, does make a difference, and I think for organizations that have less funding than others, it's really about making decisions. In how many countries do you want to work? How thin do you want to spread your money? Or how focused do you want to be to make sure that whatever you do engage in does have an effect? And that's a big difference between the different organizations that are involved in this field. Now, I'd like to conclude with focusing on the question that we're here to discuss, which is, are European political foundations key actors in democracy promotion? Of course the answer is yes, but it depends on how. The answer would be yes if you do it the right way, if you know what's happening on the ground. It's been said a number of times already. What's happening on the ground is extremely complex. In countries, especially if you're not based there with a country office, you're observing things from the outside. And knowing what's happening on a daily basis, knowing the political actors, and not just going for their demands and thinking if they want it, then we'll provide it. Because that's not enough. You have to know why they're asking it, how that impacts on their party. And only then, through a dialogue with your partners, you decide that you want to do it and how you want to follow up on that one-off assistance. So that would be a recommendation from my side, to know what's happening on the ground, and if you feel that your organization is not big enough to be able to do that on its own, then it's all about partnering up with other organizations that are on the ground and that have that expertise. And International IDEA is in the same situation where we can't know what's happening on the ground everywhere in the world, so we work through partnerships. Then, yes, European political foundations are key actors, but only when they work where their impact is highest. And again, I think that means that the different organizations need to coordinate where their help is most needed and where their expertise best fits the needs. So coordinating and making sure that your comparative advantage as an organization fits best the needs that exist in that country. And then lastly, yes, political foundations are key actors in democracy promotion, but only if they don't do it alone. And let me reiterate the invitation that I mentioned earlier. I think we all need to come together and see how this type of work can be done more effectively. The network that many of the organizations here are part of, the Wilton Park Network is what it's called, is open to all new participants, and it would be great to have everyone in this field take part in those discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam, Paul,